The Mi Amigo was just a rusty sinking ship, but for years it had a legendary status in the UK music world.
The sound of good music and the voice of loving awareness. Live from the North Sea all through the night on 259 meters, this
It was
is
built to
Radio
carry cargo, but the ship gained fame as the long-time home of Radio Caroline, an unlicensed pirate radio station playing pop music from the 60s onwards.
Caroline and Mi Amigo invite you to sail away on an ocean of love. 24 hours a day, Caroline and Mi Amigo sailing away on the love ship.
Baby, I feel good.
The Mi Amigo was moored miles off England's coast for well over a decade. Crewed mostly by DJs, it weathered huge seas.
We would like to tell you today that the ocean is, it has some very big, gentle swells. There's no white caps or anything, but, going up and down a little bit.
But then finally, it faced one storm too many.
All the lights have just gone out, which we knew meant the water had come so high it engulfed the generator, killed the power, and the water must be fairly high now.
I'm Harry Graham, and you're listening to Outlook on the BBC World Service. Today, a pirate radio ship goes down. That last voice was Nick Richards, one of the Mi Amigo's final DJs, living aboard during the tail end of the 1970s. Pirate radio had been around for a long time by then, and for much of its history, it had dominated the pop music airwaves.
In the 60s, there were the pirate radio ships all around the UK coast, and that was just what was there. That's what you listened to, so I didn't know anything different.
Did that image sort of capture your imagination? Did you imagine yourself out there?
I never thought I'd ever end up working there, but there was a kind of glamorous side to it. Why would these people go out and sit on a ship to broadcast music all the time?
It was because the founders of pirate radio stations like Radio Caroline had spotted a gap in the market. The BBC didn't play much popular music, and that's what many people wanted.
Riding at anchor off Harwich and safely outside the 3-mile limit, the innocent-looking ex-ferryboat Caroline is causing quite a stir in official circles. She's a floating broadcasting station, hoping to make a big thing out of commercial radio and waiting for the advertisements to roll in.
Radio Caroline was here playing kind of all the chart music all day, which people hadn't had the chance to do in the past. So suddenly, you've got what the BBC were doing for about an hour a week. You've got it every day, all night. It was like it had to be a success.
And safely outside the 3-mile limit.
There's just a 10-kilowatt transmitter pumping the music out, but millions of kids have learnt to say, I love Caroline on 199, and they lap it up from 6 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night.
Regulators tightly controlled who broadcast what on British soil, but they couldn't control the seas. So offshore pirate radio was born.
Legally, the ships were in technically international waters, so the British authorities couldn't actually go out and raid them or stop them because they were kind of in no man's land, if you like.
I'm no pirate, insists Captain Mackay, even if the radio crew are. No danger to his ship so far.
And the presenters became household names, didn't they?
They did, very much so. I don't think a lot of them had a lot of experience doing it, but suddenly you've got this radio station with millions of people listening.
Was it quite sort of a glamorous life out on the ships back in the 60s?
Very much so. Initially, they were, 2.5, 3 miles off the coast. You could see the ships if you were on the beach. It was that close. They had a full crew. They had a captain, a cook. They would have had an engineer for the generators. They would have had another engineer looking after transmitters. And you did, I think it was 2 weeks on the ship and a week off, and then back on for 2 and a week off. They worked that sort of rota.
Crew technicians have comfortable off-duty quarters, and to all indications, Caroline is a happy ship. The radio company believe it's all perfectly deep. In the ship studio, they broadcast with no more concern than if it were all in Broadcasting House.
I mean, do you think it was sort of a party lifestyle out there? You've got all these DJs stuck together on a ship 24/7. Do you think it was quite hedonistic?
I'd say it was. Because the ships were so close to the coast, people on yachts would regularly go out and see them. They would, drop presents and all sorts of stuff on board. When the DJs came off, of course, they could get great work in nightclubs and doing personal appearances. I'd say it was a good life. And 2 weeks on a ship, just doing one show, or often, a day, and paid very well, from what I can gather, because I think the organisation back in the 60s was awash with money. Living on that ship, being a bit of a superstar at the time, paid well, work when you come off the ship. How bad?
It'll be interesting to see if the young men behind this adventure can stand up against the Postmaster General, the BBC, International Telecommunications, and all the other opposition.
They couldn't, and it wasn't to last. Within a few years, the UK regulators tightened up the rules, and then the BBC launched a pop music station, Radio 1, in competition.
In the late 60s, when the last of the pirate ships around the UK, Radio Caroline, they were forced to close. And I remember getting up one morning for school, and the radio would always be there in the background. But I remember my mother saying, it's gone off, and we don't know why. And for the next couple of days, I remember my mother trying to find the station, and it was gone.
So the golden age of pirate radio passed quickly, gone before Nick had even entered his teens. Coming of age in the 70s, Nick didn't think much of those old broadcasts. He certainly never thought about getting into radio himself, and he left school without much of an idea of what to do. So he moved to London in his late teens and worked a few odd jobs as a courier. And one day, while he was killing time waiting for a package, he went to buy something to read.
And I saw this magazine called DJ and Radio Monthly. It was a real glossy magazine. It must have had a very kind of narrow readership. But I was fascinated by it. It was mostly all about Radio 1 and Radio Luxembourg presenters. But at the back of this magazine, there was a couple of pages just in black and white. And it was about pirate radio ships off the Dutch coast. And I had no idea of that. I thought when the stations closed around the UK, that was the end of it. But it seemed there was 3 radio stations off the coast of Holland, and they were operating in a similar way that the pirate ships had done off the UK. There was no authority, no law that could allow the Dutch authorities to go and seize these ships. They were far enough into international waters that they were allowed to carry on. It was a little loophole in the law. So I was fascinated reading this every month it came out. And I remember seeing once that the Dutch government was going to legislate against the pirate radio ships. Basically, they'd have to close. And as the date came closer and closer, there were rumours that they would all close apart from Radio Caroline. And I thought, this is interesting. So what are they going to do? And it seemed they decided to up anchor off the Dutch coast and come back to off the UK coast, off the coast of England. Unfortunately, they had to operate much further out at sea than they did in the 1960s, 2.5 or 3 miles off the coast in the 60s. Now they were close to 20 miles out at sea. So you're effectively in open sea, so you're exposed to everything. And sure enough, that's what Caroline did. And being so much closer to the coast of the UK, the signal was huge, and it became my go-to radio station, if you like.
From a point at sea to the circles in your mind, this is the new Radio Caroline.
What was fascinating in particular? Was it the sort of lawlessness of it? The sort of outsider status that this radio station had?
I think it was. I think there's a little bit of romance that, a bunch of people are prepared to sit on this ship so far out at sea because they're so dedicated to getting the music to you, and very different kind of music as they were at the time. Why would they go to so much effort to do this? And the whole organization, how it operated was, it was real cloak and dagger stuff. Like, you never knew how DJs got out there or how the ship was supplied. And there was a kind of romance there that did fascinate me.
Now competing with the BBC, Radio Caroline tried to offer something a bit different. They played albums and not singles, and they went for bands that were less mainstream.
The sound of good music and the voice of loving awareness. Live from the North Sea all through the night on 259 meters, this is Radio Caroline.
And the crowd is growing bigger.
as big as Caroline's audience was late at night, and there were millions listening in Holland and Belgium and France and Germany and UK, they just couldn't convert that huge listenership into revenue. And it was a hugely successful... that's where I learned so much about music, from listening to Radio Caroline and the albums that they were playing. A lot of artists I'd never heard of before, but I thought, really like this, but I'm not hearing it anywhere else.
The station was owned by an Irish man called Ronan O'Reilly. He's one of the original pioneers of pirate radio in the 60s, and he'd refused to give it up when things became difficult and unprofitable. By the 70s, revenue was so thin that Radio Caroline shared the Mi Amigo with a Dutch radio station, which broadcast a day service while Caroline broadcast at night.
Dit is Radio Mi Amigo, uitzendend met 50 kilowatt op 319 meter middengolf.
A fan of the station even started a business, taking paying passengers out to sea to view the ship, and Nick signed up.
So I sent off this letter and a postal order, and I got a letter back saying I had to meet someone at a place called Brightlingsea one Sunday morning at about 6 o'clock in the morning. So I found my way there, and there was one or two other people hanging around as well. And we all met and we agreed, well, we're all going the same place. And we got on this really old fishing boat, a big old wooden thing. And there was a Scottish captain, Captain Ord, I seem to remember his name was. And it took us about 6 hours, but we went all the way out to sea and we circled the Radio Caroline ship, half a dozen times. I think a few people threw some newspapers on, Sunday newspapers, and taking pictures, and that was it. And then we were off for that long journey back into Brightlingsea. But it really fired up my enthusiasm for getting more involved. I thought, as we got closer to the ship, I thought, this is the ship which has caused so many problems for countries around Europe. It's defied the British government and the Dutch government, who tried to outlaw it and get it off the air. But this ship, it's got so much history. I thought I'd love to know more.
Can you describe what the ship looked like?
When I saw it in the mid-70s, it had been freshly painted from when it had left Holland. But, freshly painted might look nice superficially, but underneath that paint, there was a lot of rust. And under the actual hull, which you couldn't see, they hadn't done anything to that either. So it wasn't in a great condition. A lot of stuff didn't work on it, so the nautical side of things. But, as far as a radio station, it worked perfectly.
Okay, so you've made contact with the team. How did you go about getting a job?
One guy I was chatting to on this boat trip out to Radio Caroline, we got chatting and we kept in touch. And one time, for no particular reason, I hadn't heard from him for weeks, possibly months. And I thought, maybe, I don't know, that's friendship. It just came and went. But when he did get in touch again, he said, "You are never going to believe where I've just come from." And I said, "Well, you better tell me more." Turns out he went on another boat trip, and he went out to the Mi Amigo, the Caroline ship, when they were having some serious generator problems. And he worked on a farm, so he knew a little bit about engines and generators. They asked him, would he come on board and have a look over the generators? Could he get one of them working, perhaps? So he went on board and he ended up staying there about 3 months. And when he came back, he said, "Listen, if you want to come out again when I go next time, you're more than welcome. It'll be just being like a deckhand. You'll be chipping the side of the ship, painting it. But you're more than welcome. There's probably no money in it, but if you want to come along, you're more than welcome." So I did.
Nick was just 19 at this point, and there was a reason the station was so desperate for people to come and work. The whole operation was in a really bad way.
Well, when I went out, knowing I was going to stay on board, the radio station was off the air. They'd had a near sinking, if you like, months before, and nobody really wanted to go and spend any time on it. They felt it was unsafe. So I remember climbing from the small motor launch that took us out there, climbing on board, and we'd been bouncing around for 5 or 6 hours to get there. Suddenly, when I stood on the Mi Amigo, it was like suddenly you were standing on land.
But I mean, it's such a long way, isn't it, from the glamorous days of the 60s? You've got this like rusting hulk out in the sea. Were you disappointed by that sort of lack of glamour, lack of, money?
I wasn't really disappointed. I knew it was going to be very basic. It turned out to be more basic than I thought it would be. Like you'd be wearing the same clothes for a week or more, but then, you wouldn't shave. You might have one shower a week just to, because there wasn't a lot of fresh water on board. And more often than not, we'd shower in seawater.
And it must have attracted a certain sort of character as well.
It probably did attract certain type of person that bought into Ronan's philosophy, the owner. He just wanted to keep it going. He wanted to keep it on the air. He liked this little bit of freedom that no government or organization was controlling at all. I think we kind of bought into that. And when I initially went out there, the radio station wasn't on the air. So I knew I was going out there pretty much chip the side of the ship, get some rust off, paint it with this red oxide paint. There was plenty to do. You never got bored. You could always find stuff to do, believe it or not.
Perhaps sensibly, those running the operation wanted to keep everyone sober.
My time out there, they deliberately never sent a lot of alcohol out there. Cigarettes were always there, but sometimes they would run out as well. I remember myself and another guy going through all the bins we could find in the ship. There was loads of old, like dog ends, bits of cigarettes there. Who knows how long they've been there? But again, we opened them up and put them in the plastic bag and we smoked them. It was awful.
So all the glamour of show business.
There you are now, see? But you'd never let on that side. On the air, when we were on the air, you're having a great time and here's another great album track from whoever.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you go out there as a deckhand, but soon enough, or once the radio station's back up in action, you get a chance to go on air yourself, don't you?
I did.
Why did they give you that opportunity?
The guy that had tipped me off, he'd been on there trying to fix their generators. He was on there when the radio station was back on. And I remember one afternoon, I was just tapping, chipping, painting. And he said, do you fancy doing a show tonight? I went, what? He said, well, I'm going to make out I'm seasick. And there's a couple of hours you can do, something like 5 till 7 in the afternoon. And he said, go down, pick out some songs you want to play, and you're on at 5. Wow. I have no memory of that show really at all.
Was it just pure adrenaline?
It was. I was probably clinging to the studio equipment the whole way through, I would imagine. There's just one song I remember. It stuck in my head, and I don't know why. It was a song by ELO called Last Train to London. I remember playing that. The rest, I don't know. So it worked out okay. I did that one show. When I came off, eventually I thought, well, I've really fulfilled a dream.
One of the few ways the crew could communicate with the office on land was by reading out special code numbers on air.
Currently on a fresh North Sea, it is 2 degrees. And now a repeat of some numbers for our office. Firstly, number 59, 59, 59. Also, number 60, 60.
A number might mean they just needed more supplies, it could signify something about the state of the ship, or it could just mean that all was well. The team on shore would communicate back by radio.
But the message in the evening was, who the hell was that on the air? Like between 5 and 7. And they said, oh, that was the guy, the deckhand. And they went, oh, okay, just let us know in future if you're going to put somebody on air.
So that was Nick's only radio appearance on that particular trip. He spent 3 long months at sea and a supply boat was sent to pick him up.
And to see grass for the first time in months was really weird. It's like, oh, that stuff is so bright and green. Weirdest thing. But nice to be mingling with normal people and seeing buses pass you by and trains and cars and bikes and all that sort of stuff. It was nice to get back to normal. I just thought that was the end of a beautiful little scenario in my life, if you like, and I didn't expect any more to come from it. I thought, they're probably, now they're back on the air, money will be coming in. They can probably get better people than me to do jobs on the ship.
Right.
But I got a call not long afterwards saying, would you go back out and you can do shows all the time?
Oh, yeah, I feel quite exhausted after singing along with that one. Tom Robinson Band from Power in the Darkness, a song called Up Against the Wall. 12:21 on a Wednesday morning from Caroline, live from up the North Sea. That's That's what they say on our Dutch service anyway.
Were you a good broadcaster back then?
No.
Why not?
I mean, I have recordings of myself, and I really do cringe sometimes. I know everybody has to start somewhere, but I was raw, but it gave me a kind of a grounding, a massive education in how to do something I thought I knew how to do, but I didn't. And just, I suppose, and I hope, got better at it.
Would you say, did you fall in love with broadcasting? Did you love being on the mic?
There was a magical thing about being on the ship, at sea, broadcasting, knowing there's so many people love this radio station for what it is and what it's trying to do, just expose music to a much wider audience.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I still think that's the best track on the album. Supertramp from Breakfast in America and Child of Vision played out especially for Stephanie, if you're listening. I think you probably are. I've just dropped my cigarettes, just rolled off the ashtray.
The ship is rolling.
Is it? Yeah, it's probably moving a little bit.
Yeah, slightly.
The weather forecast on the wall says it's a slight North Sea. I'm not sure quite what it is.
If you ever see a ship in a storm, it doesn't jerk suddenly. It rolls very slowly. The only thing was we used to play jingles and things on the plastic boxes. They were called carts, plastic box with tape inside. And sometimes if the ship rolled really badly, one of these machines, which are quite weighty, could slide off a shelf and bang, land on the album that was playing. Had that happened to me once. And the other thing, in a really bad storm, when the ship is pitching, you could feel all the links of the chain, anchor chain, all pulling really tight on the ship. And you get this judder go all the way through the ship. I wondered what it was at first, and then someone said, don't worry, it's just the ship tugging on the anchor at the seabed, because we never went anywhere. It was a permanent anchor all the time.
I mean, you must have had a really strong stomach to sit in a tiny little studio, no windows, and just deal with this constant motion.
I think you either settle into it or you don't.
Were you ever sick on air?
No, never was. Never was seasick. To be honest, I used to love being on the ship in a storm. I'd go up onto the bridge, high up point at the back of the ship, and just look out to sea and watch the ship sort of dipping down and then rising really up. It's fascinating, you know, one of the things you do when you're spending 3 months at sea.
The ship was in a bad state by the time Nick started working aboard, and it was anchored many miles out to sea, fully exposed to the weather. But storms weren't the only concern. The whole operation was illegal, and those involved had to be careful.
There was a guy that used to occasionally take us from the UK out to the ship under cover of night.
Is that because they get stopped by the Coast Guard?
You get stopped by, could be anyone, police, Coast Guard, it could be anyone. And if we were stopped, it was, you know, throw your passport over the side, you know, get rid of any incriminating evidence or anything. But we weren't meant to be taken out to the ship from the UK.
The Mi Amigo had actually been boarded before by the British authorities back in 1975, prior to Nick's time. One of the DJs from the ship's Dutch service was on air, and he kept broadcasting for as long as possible.
What is wrong? Will you switch that off, please? No, why? Listen, there's nothing wrong, but switch it off. It is off, man. You can see that there's nothing playing here. Here are the tape recorders.
So obviously you were breaking the law and the authorities are trying to crack down on this radio station. How did you feel that you could justify going out and broadcasting?
I knew I was breaking the law, but I felt the cause was justified. We weren't causing any harm to anyone. We weren't hurting anyone. We weren't political in any shape or form. Yeah. It was just a bunch of lunatics sat out on a rusty ship playing albums. I still think, if the authorities really did want to get us off the air and get that ship out, they could have done it easily. So I didn't think it at the time. I think we all went around with, you know, code names and code numbers on phone calls, where to meet. It was cloak and dagger, but I think they could have got us off air. They could have found a way. They turned a blind eye.
Were the musicians getting paid their royalties?
They weren't. Some of the stations offered to pay royalties, but whatever the authority is, felt if they were to take them, they would be sympathising with the pirates, so they declined taking the money.
One practical downside to Radio Caroline's illegal status was that they couldn't take the ship anywhere for repairs. It was outlawed throughout Europe, and by 1979 it was in a state.
If I knew then what I now know, I wouldn't have stepped foot on that. The ship had a lot of holes in it. So you did a temporary repair. You hammered in a wooden stake into the hole itself, so it was nice and tight. Then you built this box, a wooden box, around the stake, got it all dry, and you put this cement, it's used at sea, and it would set. That was the hole repaired. The guy that used to take us out from the UK, one time he said, "This is the last time I'm putting anybody on board the Mi Amigo." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I don't like the look of the ship. I don't feel it's safe any longer, and I don't want on my conscience the fact that I could have put you on and the ship sinks or breaks up or whatever." So he, from that trip, he wouldn't put anybody else on board, which gave me a wake-up call to maybe how bad the condition of the ship was.
But you still got on board?
I still got on board, but I quickly forgot about it. I suppose it was that, that invincibility thing. We just carried on, really, doing what we were doing. Money did begin to come in. We'd started running these strange American religious tapes late at night, and they were sending in loads of money for us doing that. But the station itself, the Dutch side of the operation, was doing really well. Caroline at night, the English service, was doing well, making money, and we were just plodding along, and we were coming, I suppose, slowly towards the end of the winter of 1979, and there was only 4 of us on board. We had fuel, had water, had food.
But what they didn't have was good weather.
Where the Mi Amigo was anchored, it was in a part of the sea called the Knock Deep Channel, between 2 sandbanks, and the ship was right in the middle of the 2 sandbanks. What the sandbanks, the effect they had was to take the force out of big waves. We were fairly protected, apart from northeasterly winds. And the northeasterly would come all the way down from Scandinavia, down the North Sea, and whoosh, right between the 2 sandbanks. And that was the one we always feared. We always used to listen to the BBC shipping forecast religiously to find out, what the weather conditions were going to be like.
Rockall, Malin, Hebrides, Faroe, Faroes. The general synopsis at 1900 Monday: low 100 miles south of Iceland, 993, expected 300 miles east.
About midday, I remember being woken up suddenly by one of the other English DJs, and he said, you need to get up. Think the anchor chain has gone. But I run up the steps, came out on deck, and there was this navigation beacon that sometimes you could see in the distance, but it was never very close. And suddenly it was really close to us, and it looked like we were drifting towards it. So it was right. We had lost the main anchor chain. We had a spare one, which we eventually put down into the sea. It took a long time to get it in, but it stopped the ship from drifting, which was the main thing.
I mean, so the whole Thames estuary is just a big network of sort of sandbanks and old wrecks and loads of stuff you could hit.
And shipping lanes as well. Sadly, some of the items we probably should have had if the ship was more seaworthy, like a compass or the steering wheel or the ship's engine working, none of those were going to happen for us. So we got onto the Coast Guard and asked them to plot our position. And they were able to tell us exactly where we were, and that we were right above another sandbank. We drifted quite a long way. So they said, at low tide, your ship is probably only going to have about 1 meter of water underneath it. Dangerously low for a hull which is peppered with holes temporarily fixed. So we kept in contact with the Coast Guard all afternoon into the evening. There wasn't a lot we could do other than check the bilges, all the different areas of the ship, to check no water was coming in.
And were you still on air at this point?
Yeah.
It's 11 o'clock. The weather. Another cold, windy night with a minimum temperature of 2 degrees centigrade. Tomorrow, yet again, rather cold for the time of year with strong southeasterly winds. Currently on a fresh North Sea, it is 2 degrees.
I do remember about 6 o'clock in the evening, we all stood in the galley in the kitchen area, and we'd been drinking strong coffee all day, and suddenly there was this weird sound rumbling through the ship. I'd never heard that before, and I've heard most sounds that ship made. We'd rested on the sandbank, And now as the tide is changing, we're actually beginning to bounce on the sandbank. The chain that had broken, all the broken chain was underneath the ship. That banging of the ship on the chain on the sandbank must have opened up some of the old holes, because slowly we could see water coming into various different areas of the ship. I remember about 11 o'clock, I'd gone on air and I'd read the weather and I'd read out this series of numbers for our office, which essentially said, we've broken the anchor chain, we're drifting, we're in trouble.
Number 60, 60, and number 25, 25. And once again, we apologise for the absence of normal programmes, and however, hope you're enjoying the continuous music.
Meantime, the lifeboat had been sent out encouraging us to come off, but we said, no, we'll be fine. You know, history of the ship, it's never sank. You know, it's always lived on. It's just another chapter in the Mi Amigo's lifetime. The other two guys said, I think this is the time we need to at least take the radio station off the air.
Radio Caroline, broadcasting on 319 metres, 963 kilohertz. Well, we're sorry to tell you that due to the severe weather conditions and also to the fact that we're shipping quite a lot of water, we're closing down, and the crew are at this stage leaving the ship.
Yeah, it's not a very good occasion, really. I have to hurry this because the lifeboat is standing by.
From all of us, for the moment, goodbye and God bless.
I do remember thinking, well, someone's got to turn off the transmitter. So I walked through the ship down to the transmitter hole. And it was a poignant moment. Again, it's difficult to understand maybe unless you're involved in something like this. And as I stood with the last switch on the transmitter to turn it off, I thought, I wonder, is this the last time this is ever going to be turned off? So I left it, counted to 10, and then flicked the switch off, and it went off the air. And then the lifeboat said, look, we've got to get you off. You're not in a good state at all here. Over a very short space of time, the water was almost over the bilges. That's a couple of feet maybe of water, and it was sloshing around near the generator. So when the lifeboat got to hear about that, they said, you know, we have to get you off, but how are we going to get you off?
Because it was so rough outside.
It was really rough. We were kind of half stuck on a sandbank at a weird angle. The sea was really rough. So they said, forget about any bags. We're just going to bring you off, 4 of you. Captain said, this is what you got to do. One at a time, one of you stand on the side of the deck. Other 2 that are still on the ship hold his legs. And when we get close enough, we will tell you when to jump. And you must jump. Don't think about it. Just jump. And it was like orders, if you like. It wasn't advisory. It was an order. And the Dutch guy went across. They grabbed him, put him inside, down below in the lifeboat, and the lifeboat went off. And it tried again, just skimming by the side of the ship. I think I was the second one to come off. I could feel the 2 guys on the ship holding my legs really tightly. I was holding onto the guy wires which supported the big aerial on the ship. And then when I heard jump, I jumped, and I felt my legs being pushed forward as well. I was grabbed, same way as the Dutch guy, put down below on the lifeboat, safe. And the third person to come across was the canary that we had on board the ship. I don't think the lifeboat crew were expecting that, but what do? You can't leave a canary in a cage, you know, to sink on the ship. You can't really, can you? So next was Wilson the canary was the next one. And it was the whole operation getting us off, I think, was nearly an hour. And one of the crew on the lifeboat said, all the lights have just gone out on your ship, which we knew meant the water had come so high it engulfed the generator, killed the power, and the water must be fairly high now.
So she's going down?
Going down fast. So I remember we all looked at each other and said, what do you think? And probably best to go into land now. So that's what we did.
I mean, you'd had such a bond with this ship. How did it feel knowing that it was never going to operate again?
I suppose, well, really, really emotionally upset. Again, it sounds difficult. Well, you know, how can a man be so sad to see a ship, you know, sink? But it wasn't until the next day when I got home that I saw the lunchtime news, and that was the confirmation that the ship had actually sunk.
Off the Kent coast, the pirate radio ship Caroline has sunk.
Mi Amigo, the ship from which Radio Caroline broadcast, has sunk.
And sadly, the Mi Amigo goes down.
Radio Caroline sinks, and it's the end of an era of British broadcasting.
Light aircraft had gone out during the day and had filmed.
All you could see of the Mi Amigo today as she slowly sank was her mast. Earlier, as the sea gushed in, the crew had been forced to abandon ship. £100,000 worth of equipment and a priceless collection of tapes and archives went down with her.
And I was like staring at the screen going, oh my God.
Wow.
Really, truly, the end of an era and the end of what that ship had done and all it had been through. You know, all the governments around Europe trying to close it, get it in, silence it. But it was the sea that actually claimed the life of the ship, if you like.
Yeah. And you were actually in a bit of trouble, weren't you, when you were taken back to land with the police?
Yeah, we got to Sheerness is where they took us. And we arrived there. And I remember when we all came on the deck of the lifeboat, all these headlights of police cars. I thought, oh, my God. Because occasionally, if we'd come off in the past and you'd been questioned, where have you been? It would be things like we'd been on a fishing trip or sightseeing or something. This time, we couldn't really use any of those excuses. So we were met by Kent Constabulary. We were taken back to the police station, all in separate cars. Fairness, they kept us warm in the canteen, soup, food, everything. But we had to wait around for quite a few hours for representatives of the Home Office to come down from London to question us. Right. It felt like quite a grilling at the time when they eventually arrived at Sheerness. We were all taken to separate rooms and cautioned, and they wanted to know everything, from who's running it. They wanted phone numbers. How did we get out there? They wanted to know absolutely everything, and probably rightly so, to ask the questions. I don't know what the others said, but I'm not sure they would have made too much sense from what I told them.
Was it easy to sort of get on with your life after this event? Was it easy to move on to the next thing?
Not that easy. We were told by the office, a new ship is coming. New ship is coming. Kept being told that for a long time. And it got to the point where I just couldn't survive. I had to get a job. And I did this security work again. I went back doing that for a little while. But to be honest, I was thinking, if sitting on a rusty ship 20 miles out at sea is dangerous, what about walking around London with a bag of money that someone might just shoot you to get it? That seemed like even more dangerous to me. So I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And I got a tip-off that in the Republic of Ireland, there was a lot of pirate radio stations on land, and they were allowed to operate because of a little loophole in the law. So if you started Radio Harry this afternoon and say the police come in and raid you and you go to court and you're found guilty, you pay your fine, but you could then go back to the police station and get your equipment back and go back on air. Right. Weird, but other people got to hear about this, big business did, and it turned out towards the end of the 80s, very large, powerful radio stations, unlicensed radio stations, or pirate if you like, were allowed to exist until legislation closed those down. But I heard about that, so I came over to Ireland looking for work, and the first door I knocked on, they said, "You worked on Radio Caroline? Here's a job." And I kept finding that happening. And I still think I was fairly rough then. But Caroline was opening doors for me that I never expected. And I worked, doing radio in Ireland, pirate radio for a while, and then legitimately today.
Going legit, did it lose some of its appeal to you?
Do you know, a tiny bit. But I don't know, there's something, every day when I go on air, I still get a kind of a nervousness in the stomach, there's an adrenaline goes, and I'm glad I have that. And for nothing else, it proves that maybe, I'm doing the right job in my life. Maybe I was meant to do this.
That was Nick Richards speaking to me from Cork in Ireland. That's all from today's Outlook. I'm Harry Graham. Thanks for listening.